Good afternoon, good morning. It's great to see you all. It's great to have you all here. I'm super excited about today's session. This is our fourth Hot Seat event. And today I've got a special guest, someone that I really look up to, someone that I've been following on the web for quite some time. He's an expert in email marketing. He's an expert in newsletters, and I'm sure he'll be able to share some of his knowledge, some of his tricks with us today. Folks, say hello to us on chat. Let us know where you're joining us from today. For those of you that don't know who our guest is, it's Dan Oshinsky, joining us from New York, right? I'm correct?
Yep.
All right. My name is Michael. I'm joining you from Gdansk in Poland. And folks, let me just shortly introduce you to Dan. So he's been in email marketing for from what I know, 12 years or over 12 years already. He's running an email marketing consultancy called Inbox Collective that helps brands, helps indie newsletters grow their audience, grow their subscribers, and make money, make revenue from emails. Before that, he also used to run this online monthly briefing document called Not a Newsletter. This is how I actually got introduced to you, Dan, because this is a resource that I've been using myself and I've been recommending to everyone that I spoke to about email marketing. This is like probably the best place. Used to be the best place for all the news about email marketing, about tactics, tricks, but also industry news. So super helpful things. But also you used to work for BuzzFeed and the New Yorker, where you run email marketing teams. So 12 years in this space, working with numerous brands. I imagine brands small and big as well. So I can imagine you have plenty of things to share with us. And I see that we've got folks joining us from New Jersey, Arizona, Mary from Toronto, hey everyone, Texas, from India, College Station, Myrtle Beach, Greece, Vancouver. Okay, we've got a super international audience here. Folks, I'm super excited. Dan, let me know, have I missed anything in the introduction?
No,
Is there anything else?
You did great. BuzzFeed, the New Yorker, Inbox Collective for the last couple of years. You did great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm super excited. Honestly, this is an honor. This is a privilege to have you here. Folks, let me just share the formula for today's session. This is a live Q&A session. So I have a few questions already prepared for Dan that I've collected before this meeting, but this is all about giving us, everyone here, an opportunity to speak to Dan and ask him questions. Anything that comes to your mind about email marketing that you wouldn't be otherwise able to ask him because, you may feel like people on the internet aren't as available, but I'm sure that if you reached out to Dan, visited Inbox Collective website, he would actually respond to you. But folks, this is your chance to ask your questions. So feel free to ask the questions. We will be sharing them later on throughout the presentation, throughout this meeting. I'll be gathering them. But let me start with this big question, Dan. How is it, or what led you to focus your entire career about email marketing?
I didn't go to school for this. Like most folks who work in the email space, I really stumbled into it. My background was in journalism. I was a reporter. I went to journalism school at the University of Missouri. And after graduation, worked a few different jobs, but realized I really liked working kind of in these sort of in-between roles at news organizations where I got to work with lots of different parts of the organization. At Condé Nast, we called these bridge roles. I liked being the person who kind of sat at the hub of a lot of different things. So working with the writers and editors, working with the marketers, working with the product and data team, working with the events team. I liked kind of being at the center of it. And email was one of those tools that affects everybody within an organization. You know, a big org like the New Yorker, we're selling subscriptions, tickets to events, they're selling products. We are trying to get people to read our stories. We're trying to drive time on site and engagement. We're trying to make sure people subscribe and stay subscribed. All these different things that email did for the organization. And it was fun to be in a role that kind of sat at the heart of all of that. And with that work, and now with the work I've done with Inbox Collective the last 5 years, a lot of this is about getting the chance to help organizations and help individuals figure out how you get the most out of this tool. Email is just super powerful. You all know this. It does so much for so many different businesses, whether you're a one-person operation, whether you're, a multinational corporation. Email is just super, super powerful. And so I discovered I really like the tool because you get to work with lots of different teams. It's really powerful. There's so much opportunity for testing, for growth, for optimization, for trying new things, for launching new things. It really fits how I like to work, which is trying stuff, working with lots of people. I've just found it to be an endlessly fascinating tool. And, you mentioned I'm 12 years into working in email. I'm still learning new stuff about this space every single month, which is one of my favorite things. I love working in a space where there's always new things happening. There's always new things to learn and try and get smarter at, which is so fun. I certainly think that if this was a thing where I learned everything I need to know 10 years ago and I've just been quietly coasting on that knowledge, I probably wouldn't be doing this job right now. I would have moved on to something else, but I love there's always new things to try and learn.
Nice. Wasn't it tempting at any moment to bridge, into a slightly different space? Email has been around for about, over 50 years now.
Sure.
But there are new things coming up. We have social media, we have Instagram, Snapchat, we have TikTok, or content marketing in general. Wasn't it tempting to move away to something different than email?
No, to be honest, no. I worked at BuzzFeed with people who worked on all the different social platforms. In my tenure at BuzzFeed, I remember the day that Vine started and the day that Vine shut down. Vine was a social media platform that did not last in the entirety of my tenure at BuzzFeed. I like email. It's safe and stable. It's effective. It does a lot of different things for a lot of different organizations. It's great for testing. No, I've never really, don't get me wrong. I look at Instagram as much as the next person, but I'm just not somebody who feels like I'm going to be drawn away by another platform.
I'm with you. And you mentioned testing twice, so I'm definitely going to ask you about testing a bit later on. So now that I know that, you're all about email marketing and folks that have gotten to know you a bit better. So tell me, what are the key components in email marketing, of an email marketing campaign or an email marketing message that subscribers look forward to receiving?
To me, the two big things have always held true. There's two big things that have always been constant with email marketing. One is having a really clear sense of your audience. I can't tell you how often I get messages from readers who say, I'm launching something new, and I'll ask, who is this newsletter for? And they'll say, oh, the newsletter's for everybody. Everyone will want this email. And usually an email that's for everyone is actually an email for no one. Is it possible that everyone will want this thing? Sure, it's certainly possible this could grow to be a big audience. But for the most part, the most successful email newsletters have really specific audiences in mind. Even if you look at for instance, a product that's grown to a huge audience. Look at something like The Skim or Morning Brew, which reach millions of people. The Skim started with a really specific audience in mind, millennial women who were super busy. Morning Brew started with an audience of people who worked in finance, and often people who were millennials in finance. They've grown beyond that, but they started with more narrow and niche kind of audiences. So you have to have a really clear sense of who your audience is. Who are they in? Who are they? What motivates them? What do you know about them? What do they care about? Behaviors, inspirations, all those sorts of things. And then you have to figure out, how are we going to actually serve them? What do they need to hear from us? So many times when I'll work with, for instance, a local news publisher, they'll have a daily newsletter. There'll be a list of, here's the 10 most recent stories we published. And I'll say, what does this newsletter do for your audience? They go, well, it's great. It gets people back to our website. I said, that's fine. That's what it does for you. It's a way to get people back to your website. But what does it do for your reader? Why are they making time for this in the inbox? And they go, well, because they want to get back to our website. Okay, that's fine, but we can't have a pop-up on your website. We can't run an ad, a lead magnet, whatever it is, and say, good news, you can sign up for our newsletter. It's the number one way to get back to our website. We're going to have to give people real value. Why are they going to make time for this? And with email, the next person who tells me that the best part of their day is checking their inbox will be the first person who tells me that. I work in email, and I'm not going to tell you that my favorite part of the day is checking my inbox, but it's really useful and super powerful. I do it. I find it to be a place that I have control over, and that I like my ability to own kind of who I let into the inbox, who I kick out. And so for me, having a really clear sense of the audience, and then a really clear sense of what you do for that audience. Are you trying to entertain them, inform them, connect with them, drive them to take some sort of action? What are we trying to do to serve the reader? You can really tell with a lot of newsletters when they're built around what the sender wants versus what the receiver needs. And the more you can lean into knowing, all right, I know exactly who these people are and exactly what they need from us, the better a newsletter can be.
I agree with you. I think that's generally a problem in business, that we start often with what we want to say, what we want to achieve, and not what our audience really needs, what they want, what the true value for them or the benefit for them would be. So how would you say brands or newsletter publishers go about finding the right balance between the content and promotion in newsletters, and getting the true value to their audience?
There isn't a magic formula for this. Just in the same way, there's no right work-life balance. You're trying to find a little bit of, you're trying to find the right mix. There's a team that I've done some work with down in Florida called Pointer. They do training for journalists, and they have this great course they launched. In fact, they're going to write they have an article coming up on Inbox Collective in a few weeks about this email course they launched. It's based off a workshop they've done around this thing called work-life chemistry. And I'm going to steal something from Kristen Hare down there, who's built this course. It's great. The idea that it's not like balance with work-life. It's chemistry. It's a mix. You're finding kind of like you're putting together a cocktail almost. It's one part of this and two parts of that. And it's the same thing with an email strategy. There isn't a rule where I say for every 4 emails where you do something for the reader, where you can have 1 email that you do something to promote for yourself. You start to find ways as you understand how the audience reacts to your content, how you can incorporate, how you can talk about stuff that you want to talk about and maybe frame it within the right lens for that reader to make them understand, here's how there's value for you, or here's why there's value for you. It's just, to me, it's something that more teams should keep an eye on. If we send an email that's promotional, how does the audience react? Do we see unsubscribes? Do we see lack of engagement? If we're not seeing the clicks, the engagement that we want, the sales that we want, are we framing things in the right way? This is also a good opportunity to do A/B testing and say, I might have an email where I'm trying to promote a product that I'm putting out into the world. Well, I'm not quite sure what the right message is, or the right copy, or the right CTA is for this email for this new product. So I'm going to take my audience and I'm going to split them up into a few smaller segments and test out some different messages and see what resonates, what connects, how can we frame this new thing within a lens of, hey, here's what this is going to do for you. Here's how this is going to be valuable for you. And often, especially with a sales email, I always want to do some sort of A/B testing there to make sure I may only get a couple chances to tell someone around this product. I want to make sure that the pitch that I give them is the best possible pitch. And sometimes you have to do a little testing to figure out, well, what is actually going to resonate for the audience? It's not always what you expect.
So let me ask you about testing then. because just yesterday I saw one of the folks I follow on LinkedIn said that she's been in the industry for 10 years now in email marketing, and she said that her biggest revelation is that she no longer recommends, or she never tests subject lines for open rates herself. And she says she hardly ever finds time or finds it valuable to do A/B testing. So, what's your approach to A/B testing in general?
So it depends on where you are in your product's life cycle and the evolution of this newsletter. So, for instance, if you're just getting started with your email newsletter, I would say you may want to A/B test a few things. One is who the email should come from, that sent from name. Really, really important. For my newsletter, should it come from Dan Oshinsky, Dan at Inbox Collective, some combination of those words? What's the right name that resonates for people in the inbox? That's worth testing. Subject lines in general, should your subject line be shorter or longer, a little more explanatory or a little bit more vague? Do you want to use an emoji in the subject line or some sort of regular convention? Your newsletter name, whatever the subject line is. What do you want to do with the pre-header text? Do you want to tease more about the first story or go on and promote a second story within the email? You can test out those things at the start to get a sense of, at a baseline, like what are the best practices for my newsletter? What seems to resonate? What I often find is teams, they do that testing right up front. Hey, we figured out who the email should come from, what the subject line should look like. And then they move on to other tests around conversion, around different automations like a welcome series or a win-back series. They're testing out different growth channels. They start to shift their testing towards other structural things to help build a structure around the newsletter. And then often once they've built out that, I do find that they often come back to test around stuff like, subject lines again. I work with one team, for instance, big newsletter audience, several 100,000 people, and they do daily tests on their subject lines. And they found that, the difference between a really good and really bad subject line could be a couple percentage points. And at their size of audience, going from let's say a 35% open rate to a 40% open rate is a really big deal with the size of the audience they have. But in the in-between, they tested at the start, they test now, but in the middle, they were building a lot of other things. So it's all about trying to figure out where you are in your product's life cycle. Do I know enough information that I can write a good subject line? Do I have other things to try? Hey, I might move on to other tests for now, and then come back to something like a subject line test later when I feel like I've really gotten a lot of the good baseline stuff in place. The newsletter is growing, it's working. Now maybe I can refocus on subject lines again. But it's also something that some teams never test, and that's okay. You have to prioritize. You only have so much time in a day, in a week, to run tests and to try different things. And if this is something where you go, I just simply don't have the time, it's okay. There's other things that you can focus on too.
Yeah, I feel it. Definitely agree with the fact that you can't always test things. So what I gather is that you do recommend A/B testing, and depending on the situation, sometimes you test for open rates to maximize the open rates. Sometimes you do it to maximize conversions. Is there any like a golden rule that you'd say how often one should be doing A/B testing?
I wouldn't say there's a rule, but I would say that I think everyone should come up with some sort of plan for testing. And that could be small. You might say, this spring, all I'm going to focus on is testing out different sorts of emails to see which messages are going to convert best and take people from reader to paying supporter of whatever I'm selling. I'm selling ebooks or widgets or a paid newsletter, whatever it is. I'm going to do a little bit of testing to figure out like what messages convert. Or I'm testing out some paid growth on a channel like Facebook or Google, and I want to test out a couple different messages to see which gets people in the door and gets people onto my newsletter at the most effective rate. I want people to subscribe for as little as I can spend, but I also want them to be engaged. What's the right kind of message that gets someone that's relatively inexpensive, but also engaged? And you might say, that's what I'm testing this quarter. That's what I'm testing for the next 6 months. Great. Have a game plan. That's totally fine. Some teams that are more sophisticated, that are larger, may say, we have lots of tests we want to run. We want to run a growth test. We want to run a content test. We want to run a design test on our newsletter. There's a few things we want to try this month, a few things we want to try this quarter. That's fine. Depending on the size of the org and the bandwidth that you have, you may be able to put more stuff on your testing roadmap. But I do find it's helpful to put together kind of a list of things. Hey, this is what's next on my testing list. And as you have ideas, you might go, oh, you know what? I saw this in another newsletter and it was really cool. I want to test that out on my list, but not right away. You add it to the bottom of the list. And as you go through, all right, I tried this, I tried this, I tried this. You get down to those kind of next steps. In general, the one thing I'll say about testing is the only golden rule is if you see something in another newsletter, or if you read a case study that says, an example I always like to give, every once in a while there'll be a report that comes out that says something like, we tested out lots of different color buttons, blue buttons and green buttons and yellow buttons. And what we found was that purple buttons converted at a 2% higher rate. If you have purple buttons, you'll drive 2% more conversions than if you have a green button or a yellow button or an orange button or whatever. I'm making this up as a hypothetical. And then what'll happen is that report will come out, I'll see it, and all of a sudden I'll start noticing in newsletters, all of them are using purple buttons. And it's usually not because they've tested it and seen, well, does this work for us? There was a report that said purple buttons, and some boss said, we need purple buttons or rounded corners on the buttons, or the CTA has to be exactly 3 words, not 2, not 4, it has to be 3 words. If you see something in another newsletter, if you see a case study, you see a report, you go to a conference, you attend a webinar, and someone gives you an interesting piece of information, and you're not sure if it'll work for you, test it out and see if it works for you. Don't just take their word for it. Don't just assume that what worked for somebody else will work for you. And if there's a golden rule, it's if you see something somewhere else, make sure you try it for yourself.
Nice one. And how long would you recommend people test? Let's say, we all now want to try blue buttons instead of green ones, as you mentioned. Would you do it just one-off for one email campaign, or would you run it over time?
It depends on the size of the audience. So there are, for instance, calculators online that you can use to calculate statistical significance. Those are great if you're trying to get a sense of, is this data valuable or not? If you have 5,000 people on your email list and you try it once, you may go, this was a one-off. I'm not sure if I got enough data here to really make a judgment. If you have 500,000 people on your email list, you may be able to send 1 or 2 emails and go, we got a lot of data right now, a lot to work with. We feel pretty confident in the results. So it depends on the size of the audience, depends on how important the test is. In general, with something like a test around monetization or test around deliverability, I might test for a longer period of time because I really want to feel confident that the results are correct, as opposed to, something small. Hey, I'm trying to experiment to see whether or not this one-off marketing message, whether it makes sense to have, a 20% offer or a 25% offer. Is that going to make a difference? And I tested it out on 2 emails and we got some good numbers and I feel good with the results. Okay, we'll move on to the next kind of thing. But a bigger thing around deliverability or monetization or there's a number of things that I might say, okay, I actually want to try this for a little bit longer. I want to get a little more data before I feel really confident that this is right.
That makes sense. And I'll want to jump into another topic in a moment that you mentioned, but speaking of A/B testing, and one of the things that people want to test quite often is personalization or using some form of personalization. What's your approach to personalization? How to do it right? Whether to do it at all? How to not be intrusive with this? I know it's a lot of questions, but what's your take on personalization?
So I think there's kind of 2 pieces here that are really important. There's personalization, trying to make the email feel relevant to each user. And there's personality, which I think more organizations could get more out of, separate sort of thing. These often get conflated, but in figuring out how I get a unique voice into each newsletter. So much of the inbox is personal, and I think a lot more brands could get value in having a little bit more personality in the inbox, adding voices, using personal stories, stuff like a welcome series, stuff like one-off sales email. Have a voice, have someone behind this, have it come from a person, make sure it sounds like you. On the personalization side, I'd say some of it comes down to whether or not you're trying to do personalization of one to many, one to some, or one to one. So on the one to many side of things, you may say, well, we're sending an email out to a large list, but we're going to do something small like, utilize a first name or a last name in the email. Or we're going to try to drill down and adjust the message slightly based on geography. We know that you're in this country, so you're going to get a slightly different, you're in Europe, so you're going to get a slightly different offer than that reader who's based in Asia. Okay, that could make sense. On the one to some sort of thing, we might be thinking around things like a lot of the brands that I've worked with, for instance, big news brands, they'll have newsletters for lots of different categories. We have newsletters around business, politics, sports, books and literature, movies. That is a version of personalization. Hey, you could sign up for our daily newsletter and get whatever our best stuff is that day. But you could sign up for our, for instance, crossword puzzle newsletter, and we'll deliver a crossword puzzle to you once a week, 5 days a week, whatever it is, because we know you're interested in that sort of thing. And that is a form of personalization, offering different sorts of products. Then you drill down to the one-to-one sort of thing of, hey, we know that you're interested in these topics, and we're going to deliver a newsletter with personalized content, recommendations based on who you are. I will say, it's a good starting place for that sort of one-to-one personalization. Sales emails are a really good place to do it. For instance, with the news brands that I work with, often I'll say, hey, we have this list of people who we know are interested in not just sports, but a specific sports franchise. I'm in New York City. These are the people who subscribe to our New York Knicks newsletter. Instead of sending a more generic ask and telling people to pay to subscribe, why don't we try to personalize this based on their interest in the Knicks and figure out if we can test out a few different messages that are around subscription, but tied to that, Knicks fandom. We know they care about this. They open these emails. How do we try to create some messages that feel really custom to them? You're a Knicks fan, but we have some sort of content that might be relevant to you if you pay to subscribe, or offers, or access to writers, or live events, or whatever it is. Like, we're going to test out some messaging for them. And so I do think some teams get caught up in the idea that if we're going to do personalization, we have to come up with a newsletter that is fully personalized. Every article in it feels just picked for you. And that's not the case. We could do personalization on kind of the one to some level. We could do targeting around special offers. There may be simpler places to start.
I like your approach. I often hear reluctance from folks that don't want to do personalization because it feels like, they have to jump to one-to-one communication right away. Yeah. But for sure, as you said, you can start with trying some offers being personalized, sending some one-to-some messages, just to figure out. And to give you an example, when we're running this event, hot seat event, we see that when we have a topic around a particular niche and we're only targeting the invitation to folks that are interested in, let's say, affiliate marketing, and our engagement rates are much, much higher than if we send it over to everyone. So that's something that doesn't cost us anything to try. And I think our audience would appreciate that as well.
It's like, Michael, it's like anything else. If you're, let's say we're at a dinner party together and there's a bunch of people in the room, and you go over and you start having a conversation with someone you've never met and you're pitching them something blindly. I don't really have a sense of what you're interested in. Other than that, we were all invited to the same dinner party. Oh goodness, that person might go like, I don't want to hear this message. I'm not interested in what you have to say. But if I can learn a little bit about you, what you're interested in, then I can come up with the right conversation, the right message, the right thing to talk about. And so many organizations I see, they just assume that everyone who's in the room wants to hear about every topic all the time. And you're point is very well taken. Hey, if I got a message that was all around affiliate marketing stuff, I might go, no, thanks, that's not really for me. That's okay if it's a one-off, but if there were 5 emails or 10 emails, or you're constantly bombarding me with emails around this sort of thing, I might just go like, the team at GetResponse does not seem to listen to what I actually want. Like, why are they always telling me about the stuff that's not relevant to me? So the more targeted you can be, the better. But if you have to start with kind of a wider lens, focusing on bigger picture sorts of or small personalization efforts, that's okay. Not everyone has to dive directly into like full one-to-one conversations.
I agree. And I like the metaphor with the dinner party. I think it carries the message well. So I've got the last question that I want to ask from the ones that I've prepared. And I'm going to turn to questions from our audience. So folks, feel free to add your questions, gather them up. This question comes up quite often from our audience. So this also comes from them. So what strategies have you found most effective in converting email subscribers into paying customers or supporters? It's so easy to offer a freebie, a downloadable, a lead magnet, etc. But how do you eventually turn these people into customers so that you can get your return on investment?
Yeah, we just published a story a couple of weeks ago on Inbox Collective about 11 different tactics that smart newsletters use to convert readers to paying subscribers.
Oh, nice.
And what I found working with and really studying people who are doing great in this space is there's never just one tactic. They might try small things like, in the header or footer of the email, have a different ask that they're including. They might be testing out different messages and different CTAs, sometimes around the benefits of what you get when you pay, sometimes around the value that you as an organization or an individual bring to the table, and that's why you should pay. They might be doing one-off emails or ongoing campaigns, a series of messages. They might be using house ads within their newsletter. Sometimes that's text, sometimes that's like an image. They're never just doing one thing, though. The best-in-class organizations are trying lots of different things in connection. So sometimes I'll work with a team and go, all right, one of the first things we'll do is set up the welcome series. If someone's going to subscribe, they're new to your organization, we're going to introduce them to different members of the team. We're going to share content that's going to be relevant. We're going to ask them to take a next step and subscribe or donate or buy something. And they often will go, well, that's great. Do we have to do anything else? Yeah, this is one step along the way. We're going to have to ask in a welcome series, but we're going to have to ask through one-off emails or ongoing campaigns or small nudges within a newsletter. We're going to have to try a lot of little things in concert with one another to make this work. And the teams that I find that really struggle are often the ones that go, we don't ask. I had a funny conversation with a team the other day who told me, we only ask people to donate and support our work once or twice a year. And we're not sure why we're not driving more donations. It's like, I think you just answered your question right there. If you're asking people once or twice a year, we're probably not asking enough, keeping in mind, of course, that even on a really good email, best-in-class newsroom or publication, seller, whatever it is, a great organization, you might get 1 out of every 3, or maybe if you're really lucky, 1 out of every 2 people to open your email. So if you're not asking on a regular basis and in different ways, if I just ask as a one-off and the open rate's 40%, 3 out of every 5 people who sent that email didn't see the message. We never got in front of them. It's like I didn't ask at all. So people have to ask in different ways, different strategies, big and small, and be willing to probably ask maybe a little bit more than you think you should, because it does take time for those messages to resonate. I can't tell you how often I work with teams and we'll do a survey around a new product, an offer, a newsletter, a podcast, something they're putting out into the world, and we'll ask, if you haven't signed up for it, if you haven't purchased it, why not? And often the message is, I didn't even know this existed. I haven't heard about this. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. I'll go, I thought we asked a lot. I thought we really promoted it. Well, for a chunk of the audience, if they missed that email, they were on vacation that week, they weren't paying attention, they didn't scroll all the way down the email, they might have missed it. You've got to ask and ask often.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a big challenge for marketers in general. They don't want to over communicate things. They're afraid that their audience will unsubscribe, they will start ignoring their emails or any other communication. But if you only send those 2 emails per year, you've got a big chance that they will, like most, will never even see it. So they cannot support you. And even, many of them actually would probably like to support you because they appreciate what you do. Yeah. This is great. Thank you, Dan. So let me actually move to the questions from our audience. So folks, once again, please do post your questions. I see a bunch of them already. So let me just pick one of the first ones so that we're going to start at the beginning. Okay. So I see there are some questions about data, average profit per email, monthly average over time. I don't think I have access to this kind of data myself.
I have never seen any sort of average or right number. What I will say for every team is you can calculate either based on the average revenue per user or the lifetime value of a user. It depends on the type of organization. So for instance, a lot of the large newsrooms and publishers that I work with that might have a paid subscription, or even now individuals who have a paid subscription or membership, we're looking at stuff like lifetime value. What is that subscriber worth to us over the course of a year, 3 years, or 5 years? And there's tools online that can help you calculate these numbers. There are also some platforms like Stripe that will offer that data for you and help you give a sense of, all right, this is what a subscriber is worth to you. That's really useful data to have, because if you know that, it can inform what you're going to spend to grow. So if I want to put a little bit of money back into growing my email audience, because I think that some of those subscribers are going to pay and support the work. I was doing this back of the envelope thing with a newsroom that I worked with yesterday, and they were saying, all right, so let's say we spend $10,000 and we can acquire an email address for $1 a piece. And then, we get 100 of them to become paying supporters at $100 each. I'm like, all right, well, we spent $10,000. We got 10,000 new email subscribers. We got 100 new paying supporters at $100 a piece. We actually got back and broke even. We got back to $10,000 worth of value from that initial pool of subscribers. This was a pretty successful campaign that we ran. We got a ton of new growth, and we made our money back. Fantastic. But it's helpful to have some sort of sense. I don't know what an average number is, though. It would depend on the industry, depend on the organization and what you're selling to.
Okay, this is great. Thanks. There's a question about an app that helps you craft optimal titles for emails to maximize click rates. I've heard of a tool called Phrasey. I know it's I guess
AI-based tool, yeah.
Yeah, AI-based tool, but it's built for bigger publishers, if I'm not mistaken, bigger brands because of the price tag. Tools like GetResponse help you craft subject lines, and you can do A/B tests. But is there anything else that comes to your mind about this?
No, I will say that I'm sure we'll get the AI question later, so I'll just answer it now. I do think the AI tools that are out there can be useful as a brainstorming partner. I don't recommend to teams at this point that they use AI to write entire emails or, do anything where you say like AI is completely owning this email end to end. But I do find that AI can be useful for stuff like, I'm not quite sure exactly what subject line to use here. I could use some inspiration, and going into something like a ChatGPT and feeding in some information about the newsletter or the content and seeing what it comes up with. Often it's a good starting point that might make you go, oh, that's kind of an interesting angle. I wonder how I could, tweak or come up with some ideas based on this angle that ChatGPT recommended for me. It can be a really useful assistant in that way. And that could be something that you play around with. I'm not sure what the right message is. Maybe, a ChatGPT can come up with a couple opportunities. I tweak them and I test out from there.
I agree with the assistant role of the AI. Definitely would not let AI to do everything on its own. As you said, newsletters need personality, and AI is not going to take and build one for us. So for sure, I use it just to help you out. So there's a question about email click-through rate and its importance. I know open rate and click-through rate are the most common metrics that folks mention. In my opinion, open rates have lost a bit of its value because Apple MPP, the auto opens. But what's your take here?
Usually when I work with teams, I say, I want you to look at metrics from a few different buckets. So engagement metrics like open and click rates are certainly part of that sort of thing. You should also check with your email service provider to make sure you understand exactly what they're measuring. Some ESPs, click rate refers to the percentage of people who who click divided by number of emails sent. Sometimes it's click to open rate based on the number of opens. Sometimes it's click rate in terms of the traffic that you're getting from a newsletter. Want to make sure you understand exactly what it's measuring. But opens, clicks, time on site from your newsletter, whether if someone subscribed to multiple newsletters, all interesting engagement metrics. There may be growth metrics out there, conversion rate on sign-up forms on your website, how big a list is, the active size of an email list right now, how many people have opened at least one newsletter in the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, something like that could be useful. We might also be looking at monetization, could be lifetime value, average revenue per user. We could be looking at, for a lot of the newsletters that I'm working with, we're looking at click rate on ads, a lot of local publishers, they might be looking at that sort of thing. And then audience feedback is kind of the last bucket. Hey, how do people respond to surveys? Questions like a net promoter score survey. How are they responding with open-ended feedback to us? Are they replying to our newsletter? I often tell teams to pull from a couple metrics in each of these buckets. For us, hey, I'm going to look at open rate. I'm going to look at time on, for my personal newsletter. I look at opens and clicks, but I really look at time on site for my newsletter. I'm sending people to these long stories, or are they spending time reading the actual articles? That was a big deal for us at the New Yorker too. If I'm sending someone to a 10,000 word article and the average time on site is 20 seconds, we didn't do a very good job of promoting the story in the right way because we didn't get people to actually read the thing. So you want to figure out what metrics work for you. There isn't a one size fits all. I do think click-through can be a useful metric, assuming, of course, that your newsletter is built to drive clicks. I do talk with teams where they give away a lot in the inbox. The newsletter is really the destination. They're reading there. There's not a lot to click out to. And they go, the clicks weren't very good. Well, yeah, of course not. The newsletter was built to be read in the inbox. So some of it depends on how you're building the email too.
That's very interesting. I don't work often with brands that focus mostly on the open, on the, driving people to the inbox and that's it. However, I hear often that it's quite challenging to make decisions only on click-through rates because on a good day, you're going to get 3% click-through rate, sometimes higher if you're sending one to some message. So how do you make decisions based on that? But I gather that if you can connect those metrics together, especially with that time on site, if you're a publisher, I think this is very interesting and very useful.
You just never want to have one metric that you're optimizing for. This was something that I got really lucky when I was at BuzzFeed. I got to work really closely with the former publisher at BuzzFeed for a long, long time, Dow Win, super, super smart. And something she told me that stuck with me was, we never want to have a silver bullet metric. We never just want to have one thing. If you optimize everything around opens, then you're going to try all sorts of tactics to try to get people to open a newsletter. And you may start to try some shady tactics that you might not want to do, but you have to do because we got to get opens up. And when you're optimizing for a few different things, well, we're optimizing for growth and opens and engagement and, positive feedback from readers. We're optimizing around a couple different monetization metrics. Okay, we're getting a better sense of the health of this organization, the health of this newsletter, because we're not just trying to do one thing. And we have to make sure we're moving all the metrics in the right direction. Just today, I got an email from a big US telecommunications brand, and the sent from name was not the name of the brand. The sent from name was just ready, ready question mark. And I was like, what is this? And then, so I opened because I was curious, like, who sent me this email? And it turned out it was from a big telecommunications brand in the US. And I would be willing to bet anything that they decided they were going to try a bunch of different things to try to get people to open these emails. But I'll tell you, I was not thrilled when I opened it and realized what it was, because they really tricked me into opening the email today. I opened purely out of curiosity. But I wish they had just been more straightforward, because they have a good brand, they have a good reputation, and stuff like that. Trying to trick people into opening an email, that's not going to be good for anybody in the long run.
Yeah, I agree with you. We often get people asking about using this RE hyphen colon and
the fake forward, or the
exactly
that tries to trick someone into opening an email. I'd be very, very cautious about that. The rule, this is something that Yana Tori Asperaki, who writes around deliverability for Inbox Collective and is a deliverability expert in her own right, something she always has said to me is, if you act like a spammer, you are a spammer. If you're a reputable organization, but you send shady subject lines, or you try to trick people into opening emails, or you send stuff at a cadence they don't expect, or you're sending things they don't want, even if you say, well, we're a reputable business, we're not a spammer. No, but you're employing tactics like what a spammer would do. In the eyes of the inbox, you are a spammer. So if you find yourself doing something and you see a bunch of people in your spam folder trying the same tactic, you may want to take a closer look in the mirror and decide, is this really something we want to do?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't recommend any short-term tactics that can, spike your open rates, because long time you're going to lose trust of your audience. It's not going to work well for you. This is a bit of a broad question, but you mentioned nonprofits, I think, in one of your answers. Do you have any tips for nonprofit organizations how to do email marketing successfully?
Sure. With a nonprofit, often a lot of the tactics are built around driving some sort of action, getting people to either often donate and support the work, or depending on the nonprofit, to get them to participate. So for instance, a local food bank that wants to use their email list to drive people out to volunteer their time. I always start from a place of, if you're not sure what to do next with your email strategy, this is for a nonprofit, this is for a for-profit, for an individual with a newsletter, whatever you're doing. If you're not sure, survey your audience and try to get a sense of, what are they interested in? What do they need? What do they care about? And then try to use that as a baseline for a lot of the decisions that you're going to make. So often teams will say to me, we're not seeing the clicks that we want on our newsletter. We're not sure what's wrong. Let's go back. Let's survey the audience. Let's try to figure out what they need from us. Are we aligning the content that we're providing, the actions, the asks, the CTAs, or is that all aligned with what they want and what they expect from us? The other piece for a nonprofit in particular is really be focused on those big campaigns. Often, for a lot of nonprofits that I work with, the end of year campaigns are such a big opportunity, and putting together a strategy for this year. Often it starts right around now, thinking around the end of the year campaign. Do we have matching funds so people can support our work and the money can go a little bit further? Have we figured out what stories we want to tell? Are they personal stories? Is there a larger theme that we want to tell across a series of emails? And thinking through even little things like, we're going to have a kickoff email and we're going to have a thank you email at the end. I've worked with so many orgs that, one of the better performing emails in a campaign for a nonprofit is that last email. Hey, thanks. We hit our goal. We were trying to raise this amount of money. We did it, or we came up short. And people go, oh, actually, I like what you guys are doing. I want to support this. I want to make a donation. So, I'd encourage you to start thinking around those campaigns sooner rather than later, because a big end of the year campaign comes up pretty quickly. It's April right now, and you you blink and it's mid-July, and then you blink and it's September 1st, and you go, oh my goodness, we got to start putting together the end of the year campaign. We're going to start running this thing in November. We only have 2 months.
Yeah, I agree with you. We've got a tax season here in Poland in April, and you can donate 1.5% of your tax to any nonprofit organization of your choosing. And unfortunately, most nonprofits just send one email in that March or April time. And throughout the year, you've got nothing, no communication about the progress, about the cause, about all the things that they're doing. They don't want to engage you throughout the whole year. And there's little chance that these folks will be now connected, relating to you, and actually acting upon that CTA, even if you have like a great email campaign at that moment.
It's a great point. It's a email, like everything else, is a relationship-based communication channel. And you have to be working to build the relationship, to provide value. So that way, when you make the ask, they like you, they trust you. I think about this a lot with my own work. Obviously, I work in a consulting space. My newsletter is a great way for people to get to know me, to get to understand how I think. And then when they get on a call with me to talk around, well, how could we work together? Usually teams have already made up their mind that they want to work with me. They're just looking to figure out what the best possible way is, what the right sort of relationship is. And the best in class orgs, we're thinking about using newsletters to build that relationship, to establish trust, to help people understand what we do and why we do it. So when we make the ask, they already like us. They already trust us. They're already in a mindset that this is someone that I could see myself buying something from, supporting in some way. I'm already ready to take the next step. But it usually takes a lot of trust building first before you can ask people to take that next step. So many teams ask too early, or, we were guilty of this when I first got to the New Yorker. Something that I realized pretty early on, I signed up with a couple different email addresses to see like what would happen if I signed up for our newsletters. And I realized that as soon as you signed up for our emails, you started getting asks from other parts of Condé Nast. Hey, you signed up for the New Yorker's newsletter? Good news. We have a special offer on Vanity Fair or another publication like Bon Appetit. And eventually what we did is we went to them and said, look, we want to be the only people who talk to our audience the first 30 days. We want to make sure that they get the chance to get to know the New Yorker, get to hear from us, get to read us, and support us before we start asking them for other stuff. Because if we annoy them with too many asks before they have the relationship, they're just going to unsubscribe. And we can't afford to just have a leaky bucket where people come in and immediately leave because they go, oh, this organization doesn't respect me. They send me tons and tons of emails that aren't relevant to what I care about.
Nice. This is interesting. Okay, I see a question about resending emails. Let me just quickly pick that one. So what is the best criteria for resending emails? And this goes back to, open rates being, bloated a bit with Apple MPP. So what's your take? Do you ever recommend resending emails?
There are orgs and some ESPs that actively recommend that you always resend. You should always resend the email. I am not in that bucket. The resend for a couple reasons. One, if I'm resending, let's say my first email got a 50% open rate. I'm emailing to the 50% who didn't open that email. And so those are people who don't always open emails. Those are people who Apple MPP is not opening the email. There isn't like a security tool at their company that might be checking emails for spammy links, like this person did not engage. Well, the open rate on that second email, let's say it's a really good one. If 50% of people didn't open the email, I email them and I get a 5% open rate or a 10% open rate. From the inbox's perspective, they're seeing something weird. They're seeing one email got a 50% open rate, then you sent the same email a couple days later and it got a 5% open rate. And you're thinking, well, this is great. The actual open rate for that email went from 50% to 55%. We got 5% more people to open the email, whatever it is. And I'm definitely doing the math on there wrong. Apologies. Journalism major. I went specifically so I would avoid math and all causes. Let's assume for a second that I did the math right there. But from the inbox perspective, they're seeing these weird fluctuations, super high open rates, super low open rates, these peaks and valleys. That is very odd behavior that might be flagged as suspicious or unusual. I typically tell teams, you are allowed to resend an email if it's really important. If I'm, for instance, if let's say I'm putting on a conference and I'm announcing the Dan Oshinsky conference, this doesn't exist, but I'm announcing that, and I want to make sure that people don't miss it because that's a really big deal. I've been working hard and building this thing up, and I think it's going to be great. Yeah, I'm going to want to send a couple different emails around this. I may want to resend the announcement email that people didn't open. I'm going to be willing to take that risk because it's such a big deal for my business. I think such a big deal for my audience. But I wouldn't resend a run-of-the-mill newsletter, an everyday newsletter, because I don't want to run the risk that Gmail and the other inboxes see those peaks and valleys. They see high open rates followed by low open rates. I want to see them see pretty consistent engagement across the board. Now, talk with 10 email marketing experts and you might get 10 different answers on this. That's where I stand on the resend issue.
That's an interesting take. I know some ESPs make it extremely easy to resend, just one click of a toggle button. We don't recommend it as well. And my experience as well is similar to yours. It's okay, the open rate is much, much lower, and it's a bad signal for ISPs. But also, it's worth looking at how many people unsubscribe from that email. And quite often, the number of people that unsubscribe is higher than the ones that actually acted upon that offer. So you have to calculate how much it costs for you to get back this number of people that left your list.
I remember a team a couple of years ago came to me with an idea for a metric they called risk, which was how many people took the action we wanted versus unsubscribed. And so for something, for instance, like an advertiser comes to you and says, we want to spend $5,000 to send an email to your entire list. And your salesperson goes, this is amazing, $5,000. Yes, of course. And you send that email and it gets 50 clicks and 500 unsubscribes. You go, oh boy, for us, that was a super risky action. Like, we sent the email and people did not do what we wanted. In fact, they did just the opposite. This cost us subscribers. This had a negative impact on our program. You may want to come up with some metrics like that to figure out, is this the right thing to do for us?
That's another interesting take. And you also have to keep in mind that there are some folks that you don't notice because you can't measure it with ESPs. There's those people that will start to receive your emails in their junk folder because this is another email they ignored from you. So you might be losing them. You might be having like this so-called opaque churn. So people are not engaging with your content. You're losing your chance of reaching them.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like we're almost done. So you want to get maybe one or two more?
Yeah, let's finish it off with one or two more. Here's an interesting question about increasing the cadence of your emails. So someone's starting with a monthly newsletter and trying to move to a weekly newsletter.
I actually recognize the name of the sender. Say hi, it's a Jan up in Rhode Island.
Nice.
Jan was my first boss in San Antonio. Lovely team up there in Rhode Island. Okay, so monthly newsletter, want to develop some weekly products. We have a bunch of different things. This is a case where if you're making a transition, my best advice, make sure you over communicate to your audience what the transition is, what opportunities they have. They're going to have to sign up for more stuff. Be careful about what people are getting opted into automatically. We just published a thing a few weeks ago on Inbox Collective from the team at the Toronto Star, which just had tons of success with dedicated emails to specific audiences saying, hey, we've got this new newsletter. Go check it out. You can click here and opt in. But just make sure you're communicating, here's what changes are happening. Here's how to opt into the stuff we want. Make sure you have a good preferences center where people can easily change their preferences and opt in or out of the things they want. Be cautious about what people are getting automatically added to make sure that you're serving your users in a way that respects them, respects their inbox.
This is great. And I see that we're on time, so just wanted to make sure that we don't take away too much of your time. But folks, really appreciate that you've joined us today. Dan, this was amazing. I've learned a lot from you. So I knew this is going to be great, but it was even better than I expected. So Dan, would you like to share what are the best ways for folks to follow you? Any best places to visit to just keep in touch?
Yeah. So inboxcollective.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. Next edition goes out. Well, it goes out every Wednesday. Next edition is going out tomorrow from when we're recording this, and sign up. We send stuff every single week on the newsletter space. Hopefully you'll learn a lot. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me, Dan Oshinsky. And if you connect on LinkedIn, just shoot me a little note attached to it that you attended the webinar. I will say this, I endorse this fully for anyone on LinkedIn. More people should attach a little note when you connect. Sometimes I get these, requests and I don't know who they're from, but if a note is attached and go, oh, I attended the webinar through GetResponse. I loved the hot seat. It was super useful. Thanks so much. I always say yes to those people and those requests because it's, I know where they're coming from. So say hi on LinkedIn too. Shoot me a little note. Would love to say hi.
Awesome. Folks, I've shared the links on the chat now. I'll share them later on in the email follow-up with the recording. Also, I'll try to link to the study that you were mentioning, Dan, before, with the tips on how to turn people, normal subscribers, into paying customers. I think this will be very valuable to everyone. So once again, thanks, folks, for joining us. This was amazing, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. In case you have any other questions for Dan, just where to reach him. I'm sure he's going to be happy to reply back to you. So, folks.
Of course. Thanks, everyone.
And have a good rest of your week. Bye.